Moving on to our compact perspectives portion of the legislative summit. So we're going to start first with our state board perspectives specific to Tennessee. So with us, we have two speakers for that. First, Kimberly Speakman, who is the president of the state of Tennessee Board of for Professional Counselors, marital and family therapist, and clinical pastoral therapist. And she's also their counseling compact delegate. Kim is also a licensed professional counselor, mental health service provider, and is a nationally certified healthcare compliance professional. Kim has worked for Mental Health Cooperative for the past 28 years and currently serving as the director of compliance. Kim is presently the American Association of State Counseling Boards president-elect and is also a founding member of the Tennessee Licensed Professional Counselors Association and a former president of the organization. With Kim, we also have Dr. Robin Lee, who is a faculty member in the professional counseling program at Middle Tennessee State University, where she specializes in clinical mental health counseling. Dr. Lee currently serves as the program coordinator and the director of the Middle Tennessee State University's Center for Counseling and Psychological Services. And Dr. Lee is a licensed professional counselor with mental health service provider in Tennessee. She's also a national certified counselor, an approved clinical supervisor, and a certified clinical trauma professional. Dr. Lee is currently serving as a board member for the Counselor for the Accreditation for Counseling and Related Education Programs. So we thank them both with being with us here today, and I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen real quickly. Okay. All right. Hopefully everyone can see that. So we were asked to walk you through from a state perspective, why did we join the compact and why do we feel it's important? So why did we support the compact? I have been on the licensure board for a little over 7 years. And one of the things that we became aware of, or I became aware of early on, is there are 35 different licensure titles for licensed professional counselors. In the state of Tennessee, we're licensed professional counselor mental health service providers. And that gets really confusing, not only to the public, but to the licensure boards. We have an LPC license, but it is not an independent license. So you have to be the MHSP. That has been one of the things that has been prohibitive of boards being able to enter into any type of a portability or reciprocity agreement, is because of all of these different names. So that was one of the first things that we became aware of, that we were concerned about. Another being the scope of practice varying from state to state, and there being really a lack of trust among states that one state's professionals were as qualified as another state's professionals. And thirdly, there have been numerous attempts at portability over the years since I've been involved. In 2015 was the 2020 A Vision for the Future of Counseling, and there was being discussion then about portability and what it could possibly look like for the counseling profession. From then in 2017, we moved into having the National Counselor Licensure Endorsement process. There was a version in 2017, lots of discussion and folks wanting tweaks to it. So another version came out in 2018. Folks, still not all of the boards were happy with it. So the American Association of State Counseling Boards came out with a licensure endorsement plan after that. So continuous discussion about wanting to have portability, having discussion about boards being in conflict. So the compact seemed to be a way that we could overcome some of those conflicts and really come up with a cohesive plan. So we felt some of the key goals for the compact being the ability to move to another state and maintain the LPC license easily. In our state, it can take 4 to 6 months for a new application to be processed. So that's really a hindrance to licensed professional counselors and to others who are needing services. Providing telehealth in multiple states without the need for multiple licenses, and working across the nearest state line while holding a single license. Tennessee has 8 border states, so that's a really big deal to us. You may have someone who lives in Georgia, but actually works maybe in Chattanooga or vice versa. So that has been a hindrance to many licensees. So those were some of the key goals that we felt were important. So as a regulator, we have heard continuously how cumbersome it is for licensees to have to fill out an entire application, submit their education, their supervision, all of the information that they put together when they were originally licensed has to be resubmitted if they choose to move to the state of Tennessee. That is truly a burden for those individuals. It's also a burden for our board staff. They are having to review applications, full applications for established licensees when they relocate, they desire to work in multiple states, or they need to provide telehealth services in Tennessee. So this will really reduce a necessary burden. We already have a policy about military spouses and how we make an effort to process those applications quickly, but really feel that this will speed up the process even more when they need to relocate. And we have a military base here in Tennessee, so that's super important to us. We also really felt like that as a regulator, it's comforting to know that we will be operating under an established, agreed upon set of guidelines or rules. All compact states, as you heard earlier, will be following agreed upon rules. Those will dictate how we and our licensees provide services, and really addressing that trust issue among states, because if you're a member of the compact, you have agreed to abide by these regulations or these rules. So give you just a little bit of background on how did we even get to the compact. I think that's not been something that has been talked about a whole lot. So some folks are like, where did this come from? I wanted to briefly touch on that. That in January 2018, licensed professional counselor board members or boards came together to attend the American Association of State Counseling Board Conference. It was at that time that CSG and the Department of Defense came and introduced the compact to us. We had already been having portability conversations, reciprocity conversations, and been hitting a brick wall against that. So they presented this idea, explaining to us how it would work, and it was very exciting and intriguing to the boards. In October 2018, the ACA Governing Council stepped up and they voted to support the compact, and I really applaud them and appreciate how they have gotten behind this effort to move forward with the compact. We might still be stalled out if it were not for them. January 2019, I had a conversation with the TLPCA Executive Director, Dr. Robin Lee, about possibly sponsoring legislation to move the compact forward in Tennessee. And then in December 2020 is when the model legislation was actually approved, and we were fortunate to have one of our board attorneys participate in the advisory group. So Tennessee's really been at the table from the very beginning of trying to get the compact stood up, and we're very excited to be involved in it. Dr. Lee, can you talk about a little bit about the process of how we got our bill passed?
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, awesome. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to share about Tennessee's success. We've not always been successful legislatively, so this was a true win for us to be a part of the initial states that did pass the compact. this is just an overview of the progression, and I'm going to touch on each one of these as we move through the slides, but I'm happy to share this slide if anybody would want it specifically. So as Kim mentioned, she and I had a discussion about the compact, and we were certainly ready to go with that. We have been working legislatively for a couple of years, and for those of you who might not be familiar, my comments about us not always being successful is I can go back to 2014 when our legislator adopted a law that exempted groups of people and counselors from a particular standard in ACA Code of Ethics. I think for TLPCA, we found that we were not ready for legislative issues. And so that was the real impetus for us to get involved. And so by the time the compact rolled around, we had been working really hard to develop relationships and make sure that our lobbyist was working on our behalf on a regular basis. So I feel like that that in and of itself is just the background of how we got to this point of really knowing how to pursue legislation, how to get bill sponsors, and really move it through the processes that were required. Kim, if you want to advance, please. So in 2021, the Tennessee the TLPCA voted to support the legislation. That was in February of 2021. Our lobbyist, Jenny Ford, who we were working with and have been for several years, began looking for sponsors. And so we were pleased to find Senator Richard Briggs, who was our initial sponsor in the Senate, and shepherded it through the Senate, which I think was the bulk of the work. So the other thing that Jenny was able to do at the time was, this was a 2-year process for us. So I'm going to talk about 2021, and then I'm going to talk about 2022. But in 2021, it did pass the Senate, but it did not go through the House until 2022. But she was able to put, and this is language that is beyond me and my expertise, but a placeholder in the House of Representatives for that legislation to be easily introduced in the next year of session year 2022. So that was the path that we took, successful in 2021 in the Senate, and then we'll talk about in 2022 for the House, if you want to. So it first went through the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. DOD did provide a letter of support in March. After the Health and Welfare Committee, it moved to Government Operations, and then it passed Government Ops and moved to the full Senate and passed the Senate in mid-April in 2021. If you want to advance. And then in 2022, as I mentioned, she did have this placeholder. We were able to identify Representative Sam Whitson. Both of these gentlemen have been very supportive of our organization and even carried other legislation for us. And so Representative Whitson shepherded that process through the House, and then it traveled through the various committees. In April 2022, it passed the House of Representatives, and with no opposition. And so moving forward, in late April, the compact was signed by the governor, and then in June, it became Public Chapter 1088. And so a question may have popped up, and we're happy to answer those in a bit if someone will let us know what those are. But I think that some of the recommendations that I've kind of already talked about was just having a presence in the legislative world, developing relationships, and making your profession known. It's really about setting the stage for future opportunities, and they just have to know who you are, what the profession is, and really educating them. We can't assume that they know all the ins and outs of professional counseling, in that world. Our lobbyist was instrumental in making this happen for us. Had it not been for her, I just do not think that we could be successful, because our relationships were developed through her relationships, and she really was our lead in terms of knowing how to go through this process. So even if it's on a temporary contract basis, then if a state is working toward that, then I would encourage them to consider hiring a lobbyist. There are excellent ones out there, and they do a lot of, some will actually work with nonprofits on for a budget, I guess, and helpful to the organizations. And as Kim mentioned, we were very fortunate to have our board attorney be a part of the compact task force. And so he was able to give us a lot of information, a lot of guidance as well. But I would certainly enlist the help of an attorney that's associated with the licensing board, whether it's a Department of Health or someone that just has that knowledge and expertise as well, to be able to navigate the process that most of us probably have no idea how it works. So I guess it's time for questions, and there were some questions that we were asked to answer, but I'll pause and see if there's any other questions before we dive into those. Good.
We do have a question in the chat. I know you've addressed at least, some of the suggestions for those in other states, but and some of this are maybe included with the questions we have here on the screen, but just speaking to the key hurdles that you face along the way, is any further information that you want to share regarding that?
Right.
I can take that one, Robin.
Mm-hmm.
We were very fortunate that we did not have many hurdles. Tennessee is a very compact, favorable state. There are many existing compacts already in Tennessee that have paved the way for us to be able to pretty easily get this passed. So our legislature was on board almost from the beginning, so really to no opposition.
And I'll mention that too, just having relationships even with other professions. I had a conversation with the executive director for the social work organization yesterday, and so they're working on a compact, and we know that the marriage and family folks are working on one as well. So I think that it's helpful to just know what's happening in other groups, so that you can be aware of their process. As Kim said, it was pretty easy for us given the history. So.
I'll also add that we did not really reach out to the other boards to have conversations with them before we decided we wanted to move forward with the compact, because our board attorney was involved. But we as board members did review compact language for some of the other boards, so we had an idea of how ours compared to the compacts that had gone before us, and knew that it was really templated and just following suit. So we felt very comfortable in this movement as others had gone before us.
I don't see any other questions in the chat currently.
I can address what do you wish you had known ahead of time. And as Kim said, I think we were very fortunate to have legislators that understood the compact process. I think that the information provided by CSG, the support that they received from ACA, it really did make it an easy process. From here's the legislation, that can be one of the biggest hurdles is developing the legislation. So if you have it and you can present it to the lobbyist, who then presents it to these bill sponsors, who then takes it from there, and then it can be pretty seamless. I think that there can be hiccups occasionally for whatever reason, and I can't necessarily speak to this, but I can tell you that it did happen. There's no intention of there being any fiscal note to the compact, and we had a fiscal note that appeared and we really didn't know the source of it. So it did take a little bit to say that this is not going to cost the taxpayers anything, that there are grants that are going to be available, and working without having to go through the finance committees was something that we had to address in the House. There were really no hiccups in the Senate. In the House, there were some questions in one of the committees, but ultimately Representative Whitson handled those beautifully, and it received unanimous support.
Yeah, I would add that in Tennessee, our board is required to be financially independent. So we have to have the financial resources in place if anything were to come up that we would need to pay for. And our licensure fees more than cover, plus our reserves, any expenses that we might have through the compact. So once the legislators heard that, they were really okay.
All right, and we have one more question in the chat here. So just to clarify, does this mean that there are not any drawbacks that you see as far as Tennessee being part of the counseling compact from the perspective of counselors living or working in the state?
I don't see any concerns. Most folks are really excited. We're actually having to calm folks down and tell them that the compact has not been stood up yet. They can't start practicing in other states. They don't have that privilege to practice yet. So that is a challenge that we're currently facing, is trying to let folks know just because we've said we're part of the compact doesn't mean you can start doing what you want to do yet. There's a process. So Robin, would you add anything to that?
The only thing I'll add is that we worked really hard to keep our members informed, so that at every step of the process, they were aware. And so, as Kim said, it's still a lot of education about the timeline and letting them know that Kim is going to be representing Tennessee in the development of the rules. And that was really important to us to have a seat at the table. And it was important. I think that was also important for the legislators to know that Tennessee was going to be involved in the development of the rules and regulations around the compact. So I certainly can't identify any drawbacks at this time. I think that it fixes a problem that we've had for many, many years, which is counselors' ability to practice in other states. And given the fact that this is not new, this is very common with other helping professions and health professions, that it seems that it makes sense for us to be involved. As I said, I know that the two other mental health professions in Tennessee are working toward it as well. So it does seem to be something that everyone is considering.
Okay, great. We had another question in the chat that Isabel answered regarding the legislation for the counseling compact. So just to reiterate that point, it is on that link that Isabel put in the chat there, counselingcompact.org, and toolkit section, just to highlight also for the compact legislation that as a contingent for it being a compact, there necessitates that states agree to the same language. And so there is a message included on that legislation link that speaks to that, about that there can't be any substantial changes to that language. But if there are any questions or concerns regarding that, CSG is available to help review those on behalf of the counseling compact there. So I'm just going to look at the chat once more to see if there's any other questions. It does not look like there is. So I want to thank both Robin and Kim. Thank you so much for your time today, sharing the perspectives from Tennessee. And Kim, we look forward to engaging with you further next month with the inaugural meeting of the Counseling Compact. So
I just put up our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to Dr. Lee or myself if you have any questions that we can answer for you later. So look forward to working with you.
Thank you.